Yeah, so I had little bit of pharmacy exposure of how things work in India. And I think that was a good eye opener for me, just to see how things work in other countries versus how things work in the
Okay,
US, you know?
Kunjal, I'm going to mute everybody first. You can unmute yourself.
Okay.
Now you can unmute. I will unmute you. Okay, good.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So I had a really good exposure, as I said earlier, when I went to the rotation with Dr. Sekhar in India to see how the Indian hospital systems work and how pharmacists are involved with it. And then I also, worked in hospital pharmacy as a technician or intern during my years. So that was another good exposure for me to kind of compare the two hospital system, the one in India and the one up here. And I really got to see the differences between the two. And originally my plan was to go into the hospital pharmacy, but then I started to like do more research in other roles in pharmaceutical industry. In US, we have what we call mid-year. I don't know if during your previous presentation, if anyone has mentioned that. During the mid-year, basically all the pharmacy students that are going to be graduating or in pharmacy school, pursuing their PharmD, they would go to this mid-year, and it's a very huge meeting just for pharmacists. I believe around 25,000 people come to this. And that's how I got exposed to the different aspect of the industry. And of course, it's very hard to break into the industry, but it's not impossible. I'm gonna share some of my insights, how I went through it, what the clinical trials is all about, give you little perspective of what roles pharmacists can fit in, or PharmD, your degree can be utilized in the clinical trials. And then I hope that you ask me questions during this presentation. So I'll try to answer it to the best of my abilities. All right, so let's get started. So I'm just gonna give you a overview of how the clinical process works. If I can get the next slide, okay. So as you know that when we go through the clinical, when a drug moves through clinical trials, it usually takes about 10 to 15 years, just depending on the drug itself. First, you have the pre-testing, and then you actually do the clinical research on humans, and then you have the data analysis of those clinical trials, followed by the follow-up, which is the phase 4 of the clinical trials. So I'm sure as a pharmacist, you've gotten the basic exposure of this, but I still want to kind of create a foundation, and then we'll try to build on that as what I do and give you more information on that. So for the pre-testing, this is where the drug is actually in initial phase. The sponsor or the drug pharmaceutical companies identify the target that they want to pursue. They'll try to identify, the drugs that are utilized for that. And this is usually done through like computational system, which is a computer system that basically throws thousands of different molecules, for example, at a target and see which one fits. Once because that's the fastest way to do it. Once they, narrow it down to like about 10 to 20 compounds, that's when they'll actually make the compounds and start testing it on a tissue level, which is like basically in a petri dish. Once the compound moves through that, while they're doing that, they're eliminating from 20 compounds to 10 versus 5, as they're moving through this. And then once they test it in the petri dish, it goes to the data is analyzed, and then it basically moves to animal testing. This is where it starts from, mice level. It could go up to like monkeys, chimpanzees, rats, rabbits, just depending on which target it is, which mimics close to the human conditions, basically. Again, once all of that is done, the data gets further analyzed, the compound gets further reduced from 5 to maybe 2 or 1, for example. At this point, all of that data is analyzed, compiled, and this is where the company will actually submit to the FDA here in US, which is what we call IND, or Investigational New Drug Application. Once that gets submitted, and if they don't hear anything from FDA, any concern, basically within 30 days of that submission, the company is okay to proceed in phase 1 clinical trial in humans, basically. During the phase 1, as you all know, it's basically healthy volunteers that come in, and this is where they're just tasting the dosage and the safety of the drug. And usually the numbers of these people are usually between 15 to 20 to, it could go up to 50. And they basically come in different cohorts. So for example, the first cohort that comes in is cohort of 10 people, and they'll get dosed at this dosage, and then data is compiled. The second cohort that comes in is another 10 people, but they're gonna get a little higher dosage. Data gets compiled. Third cohort comes in, same thing, until basically someone has an adverse reaction. So that's how they know that the maximum tolerable dose for that drug is this, because someone experienced adverse reaction. And then they keep kind of increasing the dose until someone has, as I mentioned, adverse reaction. And all of that data gets compiled again. And then they move to phase 2. Phase 2 is basically where the patients are actually has that disease that we're trying to target or cure. And they're actually coming in, and this could be probably from a couple hundred patients, and the length of the trial could be around a couple of years to a month, just depending on what they're targeting. For example, I know the couple of the clinical trials that I worked in, which I worked in, one was alcoholic steatohepatitis, and another one is NASH, which is the non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. And the phase 2 trial for that was about 8 months or so. And we needed about 200 patients or so for that. And this was, again, phase 2. And they just get tested again. Data is compiled. In this phase, you basically, the overall big picture is that you're looking at efficacy, how efficacious the drug is targeting that disease. What are the side effects that you're compiling, and these are all getting collected. And then we'll talk about each portion of this as we're moving along in the presentation, like which department handles like side effects or adverse reaction, which department handles data compilation or data collection, which department handles, the systems part of it, who's the project manager, and all of that. And then kind of hopefully at the end, the whole thing kind of fits together. And then you move into the phase 3, which is the final phase prior to approval. This is where you have large studies for several years actually being done. And this is where they're actually looking at the effectiveness of the drug. And this could be a couple thousand patients. What they're basically trying to do in the phase 3 is trying to mimic the real world scenarios. You have so many people with the disease, so you want to get the n number of people in that trial so you can create some kind of comparable picture to the real world situation. Because if you only have like 100 patients in phase 3, you're not really creating a real world scenario. So that's why you want maximum amount of people in the trial, right? So you can create that real world scenario, and then when the drug is approved, you're expected to see what you actually saw in the phase 3, and you don't have any side or curveballs or side effects that you didn't notice in phase 3, basically. Once the phase 3 is completed, this is where the drug is submitted to the FDA with the NDA application, which is a new drug application. And then the FDA will basically set a date for review. And based on the data that's submitted to them, they'll either approve the drug, or they'll say we need more data, or this drug cannot move forward because of whatever reason. And trust me, there are more drugs that get rejected than that get approved. That's why there is a lot of clinical trials that are happening. A lot of times, even the sponsor companies will not even submit to the FDA after coming to the phase 3, because what they'll do is they'll also have teams doing this analysis to see how well the data is collected and how well the drug is working in each phase at different levels. So for phase 1, they'll go in and, for example, after 3 cohorts has been dosed, they'll look at the data and they'll see how much drug is, you know, how well the drug is working. Well, for phase 1, it's just mostly the dosage and safety. So they're looking at side effects that were, you know, created in phase 1. But really in phase 2, and they look at, like, for example, after hitting certain milestone. So if it's a 8-month study, they'll look at it after 4 months, so 50% of the trial. They'll see, okay, how many patients got dosed? What are the side effects? How efficacious is this? And the way they look at that is just depending on the disease state again. It could be through labs. It could be through, you know, if they're looking at cancer or tumor, they're looking at if the tumor suppression, like if the tumor's going down or disappeared, which is what they use RECIST criteria. And I won't go too much into that detail. You can look that up yourself. But just depending on the target they're looking at, they'll go through and look at that. And if the drug isn't working, they might continue for phase 2 and see at the end, see if the drug actually had any effect on the target. Because you have to look at a bigger picture. So something you tested in, you know, rats or animal models doesn't mean necessarily it will translate into the human models. But that's what the hope is, you know. So, and then phase 3, for example, the drug could have passed phase 2 and then, you know, it was doing phase 3, and they look at a bigger sample number. So you look at the bigger or large number of people that has a disease and has taken their drug for a certain period of time. And now you're looking at how effective that drug is, you know, because you also have to look at it from cost perspective too. Because you have, for example, a drug that's out in the market already, your competitor, and that drug cost, I don't know, let's say $50 or 50 rupees. And then you have this new drug that you're, and it works just as well. And you have this new drug that you're developing. And then when it's going to come out in the market, you know, the drug cost could be $100 or 100 rupees per pill. But it's not as good as, or it's not significantly good as the $50. So, I mean, the doctors, the patients, everyone's just going to be like, okay, I'll just take the $50, just as good. Why would I spend $100 or 100 rupees on a pill that is not really, really good? You know, you got to look at it from that perspective too. And then remember, each application that the drug development company submits to the FDA has a cost associated with it. I don't have the cost number for IND, but I know for NDA, which is the new drug application that gets submitted towards the end of the phase 3, it's almost cost $250,000 or $250,000 for one application. So you have to look at it from that perspective. So there's a lot of things that fit in when you're trying to do this clinical research, and you have to make sure all of those pieces align perfectly and you have a good timeline of things. All right, let me try to go to the next slide. And again, this is where I'm going to focus on, which is the clinical trial process. So I won't necessarily go into the preclinical and then the post-clinical, which is, or the approval process. I'll barely touch on it. But I want to talk more about the phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, because that's where I work mostly in. And I feel like I have a good understanding of that process than I do with the phase 4 or the preclinical part. So this is kind of the same side as before. It's just kind of separated out in different phases, how the drug moves through each different phase. So as I mentioned, the preclinical, they're actually looking at the target to see if the drug will actually work. And that's where they're narrowing down from, you know, 20 different molecules to 1 or 2 molecules that they can move forward in human trials. And then where it says drug approved for human testing, that's the IND, or investigational new drug application, that they submit to the FDA. Once they submit that and they don't hear anything for 30 days, they start phase 1. You know, compile that data for a couple months. Again, phase 1 only lasts like 4 months or so, because it's not that many people and it's healthy volunteers that they're testing in. Phase 2 lasts about, you know, a year or so. And phase 3 lasts for several years with huge number of people that actually has disease. And this is where they submit again to the FDA for approval. And then once the FDA does the review, then the phase is, or the drug is approved for the market. And this is where they would have to, you know, Sometimes they even would, FDA would even ask them to do phase 4 study for long-term observation or follow-up, just to see. And this is more common with cancer drugs and high risk drugs than, you know, other drugs. So how does like different roles fit into this? I have a slide here. How does like different roles fit into like each phase of the drug itself? So as you can see, the preclinical or the research target, this is where you have a lot of the bench research jobs that come in. This is where you have the microbiologist, chemist, you know, pharmacologist, organic chemist, the medicinal chemist, because they're the one that are responsible creating this molecule, identifying this target, you know, targeting that target basically to identify the molecules, testing it in the tissue level as well as in the animal models. Once they narrow that down, you have the clinical trials. And as you can see, within that, you have some other job descriptions that fit in there. So you have patent attorney because you want to patent your molecule. You don't want a competitor to come up with the same idea and then basically steal all your hard work. So that's where they come in. You have toxicologists to see if there is any, you know, toxic side effects that are associated with it, or and you also have pharmacologists. So, you know, even if you don't have I was gonna say, if you have a PharmD degree, you could also like work into the preclinical development. And again, this kind of comes with more of an experience. You won't necessarily be able to just go walk in and be like, okay, I want to work for as a pharmacologist, you know. Bioinformatics, they're looking at data. You have biotechnologists, reg affairs, the regulatory affair, clinical research associate. That's what I do. And I'll talk about some of this or a lot of these roles as we move forward through the slides here as well, what they do specifically. And as you can see in phase 4, this is where the medical sales, marketing, medical writing and communication, manufacturing, all of that comes in as well. And then I'll try to see how, like, I'll try to make that, I guess, explain how PharmD kind of will fit into a lot of the roles that you're going to be doing and how you can use your skill set to basically work in any of these departments. All right, so for the for the clinical trials, you'll have a project manager. And as you can see here, the project manager is responsible for a lot of departments report to basically the project manager. So what is a project manager? They're responsible for that whole trial. So for example, if I'm working on a NASH study, or if I'm working on a one particular study and it's in phase 1, I'm responsible for that phase 1 study until its completion. And within that study, you have all of this department working, reporting to you, you know, from their respective job description of what they're doing and what the issue is, making sure everything's running smoothly. If there's any issues that are coming along, they're reporting it to the project management. The project manager will probably either advise them for solution or alternative options. You know, they're making sure the timelines are met in a timely manner, all of that things. So as you can see here, we have some quality management, you have site investigator, site management, patient enrollment management. And again, not all the trials will have all of this. For example, patient enrollment management, that's done at a site level. So unless you're targeting very rare disease, if it's just a normal like disease that you have, like the prevalence of the disease is pretty high, then you won't necessarily need that patient engagement, enrollment management, because you'll be able to enroll patients very quickly because of the prevalence of the disease. But if it's something very rare disease that you're looking at, you know, genetic disease, then you might need that to create that advocacy group and try to reach out to those patients all over the world, basically, to try to get them to enroll into your trial. So as you can see, you have safety management, lab management, because every study you do, basically, I haven't came across any studies that they're not collecting lab samples. They're not drawing blood from patients and looking at the labs. So you need lab management to send, well, first of all, process those lab samples that are shipped from site, from the patient, to the laboratory. Second, the lab management will also ensure that the site has a lot of different materials they need, tubes, testing kits, all of that. Budget management, this actually a lot of times project manager will deal with it. They're also in charge of the budgeting as well, not just at site level, but also like at the clinical trial level, because you want to make sure the budget that's allocated for that project is on par with where you're at with your timeline, because you don't want to overshoot your budget, but you also don't want to drastically undershoot it or cut corners, IMP management, this is the investigational medicinal product management. So basically the drug that you're testing, you need a team basically to make sure that the drug is sent out to the site in a timely manner. It's temperature controlled, if it needs to be refrigerated or whatever, all of that stuff. And I'll talk a little bit more about it, how that fits in during my job description, because I do deal with that too. And then you can see some of the other stuff that's listed here. I won't go through all of it just for time's sake. All right, so the next slides that I have, basically your PharmD skills can be used for any of this job description that I'm going to talk about to basically acquire a job or apply for a job, because you have that expertise, you have the base foundation for clinical disease and or different disease states. The only thing you would need to upskill would be some of the things that specifically ask for it, So medical information and communication specialists, a lot of times they could be involved in phase 4. So this is after their drug has been, approved, and it's fairly new drug. So not a lot of people or doctors even know about this drug being approved. Because if you think about it, not every doctor or not every healthcare specialist is keeping up with a lot of the drugs that are being approved until either they come across with it, or if they're working in a very specialty market, like a rare disease, then they might know, oh, this drug is on market for approval, or this drug is in clinical trials for my patients. But if you're a regular family doctor, and you have diabetes drug that's being out in the market, or hypertension drug that's coming out in the market, they are not necessarily keeping up with that, because they have a lot of day-to-day jobs that they need to see patients, and they have all the equipment or tools they need in their arsenal to prescribe medicines, because there's so many drugs for hypertension, there's so many drugs for diabetes. So this is where the next two positions come in. Medical information and communication specialists. So they synthesize and produce evidence-based scientific and clinical drug information. So these are response to on and off-label inquiries. So this could come from, patient. For example, if I have a diabetes, I've tried every drug that I have. I see a commercial on a TV for this new drug that came out. I want more information on that. What do? I reach out to the company. I go to their website. I look at where it says request more information. I can request that information. And a lot of times these experts are creating that information and posting it on their website or in a brochure form. They're making sure that information, the data that you're publishing or data that you're presenting on website or on brochure are accurate. It's not false information in regards to that product. They're also looking at sort of the marketing guidelines too, because you're also in a way marketing your product. For example, you see a lot of the commercial, well, in India, I don't think they're allowed to do that, but here they are allowed to do commercials of new drugs here in US. So they might come out with commercials saying like, oh, our drugs is better than this drug or whatever is on market currently by, by lowering your hypertension by 10 points or something like that. And they're allowed to do that. So all of that information, make sure that it's accurate, is done by medical information group and communication group. They're going to be also responsible for assisting colleagues in their field, which are the medical science liaisons. And I'll talk about that in the next slide or so.
Kunjal,
they're also evaluating.
Kunjal, one second. Do you know how to clear the screen here? I mean, somebody has been asking and I've been trying to do it. Did you make it or somebody else in the audience?
No, I don't think. Might have just came. I don't know how to.
So this might be from someone audience. A request
Okay.
to all, please don't do this.
Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop screen share once, okay? And
Okay.
then Kunjal, stop it once and then go back to it to the next slide and see whether it stays there.
Okay, let me see if that works.
Yeah. And please, audience, mute your phone. So I mean, mute your microphone. And yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Okay.
I
yeah,
couldn't
no
figure
problem.
it out. I mean, so very good job. Keep it up. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So a lot of the the professionals that are working in this role, so the medical information and communication role, they're mostly in-house, which means they're not traveling. They're working within their headquarters or company. They might be home-based, but they're not traveling. And they're communicating with experts. So this could be doctors or field specialists in the internal or external sides too. And this department in like a whole is called Medical Affairs Department because they do a lot of the scientific data to make sure that it's medically accurate. And then they're also looking at post-approval marketing materials as well to make sure that all the information that's printed or presented is accurate. And they're also targeting target audience because you need to have a target audience who you're going to target once the drug is approved. The second role is medical science liaison. Again, they also fall under medical affairs role. However, these are the specialists that actually go out. They're traveling constantly, about 70% of the time, to different hospitals, different doctors, different different conferences. They might be trying to promote their product, but in a way that it's not a marketing. Basically they're providing the scientific data to the doctors, saying, oh, here's our clinical trial results. This is how well our drug did compared to the other one that's out in the market currently. If you'd like more information, I can certainly provide that. They're also presenting on this new drug to the audience or to the professionals, because the doctors don't know a lot of information about the new drug, because it's a proprietary information. So that company has all of that information and they need to get that out there. And this is one way of doing it, is they'll have medical science liaison. Often they'll have like a lunch or dinner with it. They'll invite all the professionals, so doctors, and then they'll present their data that way. So they're having dinner, and they're also, so that's one way to kind of lure doctors in, is basically giving them free lunch or dinners at a nice fancy restaurant. And they provide in-depth scientific and medical information. So they'll actually go through and look at the data. They'll say, like, how when we're evaluating the literature or journal that's published, basically that's how they're gonna go and present their data. Because remember, you're talking to the KOLs, and KOLs are key opinion leaders. Basically, these are the people that are kind of the smart people in their field. So you want to make sure the information you give them is accurate, because whatever they do could influence your company's product. And so it could take it up or it could take it down. So it has to be done in a very careful manner. That's why when a lot of the medical science liaison jobs are very difficult to break into, because the companies that are looking at basically are giving them their product and saying, here, go out there and kind of promote our product, but do it in a way that it's scientifically and medically accurate. And you're not necessarily, if you don't know the answer, you don't want them to make the answer up, rather just bring it back to the company, have medical experts within the company look at that question and then redistribute that information out to those experts. So they're sort of like gateway between the internal communication within the company and then the external communications to the rest of the world. They also present to like a target audiences, but this obviously will be changed. The language will be changed so in a way that the audience understand it, you know. Any questions so far? I feel like I've been just talking.
Yep, I got few.
Yeah.
See, I'm listening to you. So, okay, the first is in this, when you do the first phase 1, is there a cohort of population or you can just take any 10 people? Suppose you're doing a trial, do you just want 10 men or 10 women, or you have to have even within that some sort of diversity to make sure your results are make sense?
So that's a good question. They do want diversity, obviously, because when they go to phase 2 or phase 3, unless they're testing it in men, that product,
Okay.
you know, they want that diversity because they're going to be testing it in phase 2 and phase 3. And a lot of times how this is done is they'll have an inclusion and exclusion criteria for a person to be eligible for
Okay.
that trial. And a lot of times it'll be, for phase 1, it'll be pretty simple, you know, not having any other disease state, relatively healthy patient. Age group is another thing that they'll factor in. They'll also look at if you're doing any illicit drugs. So they'll want to ask you about that because they want their data to be clean, you know. So that's
okay, and one more question. I think many clinical trials, do they have one rule or some sort of contract saying that if the drug is working, then the patients who are participating in the trial should get it for rest of their life? I mean, is there an ethical rule like this? Or after one is working, then they start charging them a fees which they cannot afford?
So no, there isn't any other, any rule like that. So I'm assuming you're talking about phase 3. So after the drug gets approved.
Yeah. When the time, suppose you are a guinea pig, we do okay, we want to give it a try. But if the drug is working, then you say, no, now you have to pay for it. I mean, doesn't leave. I mean, I presume that should be one sort of, the rule that if, like every company is obliged to give the drug to the patient who enrolled in the clinical trial for the rest of the life if the drug is working.
No. So unfortunately, there is no rule like that here in the US, at least, that, you know, you have to give them free drug once the drug is approved.
Okay.
What they will do, however, is they'll come out with like promotional materials and things like that, where, you know, they put in the code and the drug prices is taken down a certain amount for certain amount of time.
Okay.
So it's not going to be the rest of their life, but, you know, they'll give them for a few years or so.
Okay. So folks, anybody else has any questions? Okay.
Yeah, just feel free to interrupt me if you have questions.
Yeah. Come on, students, part of the reason. Please, I'm sure some of you are doing clinical trials in India or other countries. And this is a great opportunity for you to ask Kunjal, how does it differ? I mean, is it exactly the same or it's something different? Please.
Okay. All right. So I'll keep going if no one has question.
We'll do it at the end. Go ahead, please.
Okay. And then the next department is marketing and market access. So it's just what the sound indicates, marketing and market access. Marketing is once a drug's approved, you want to do enough marketing so that your drug is noticed out in the world. You know, you want to start making money right away from a financial standpoint, from a company standpoint. They want to make money on your drug, basically. And the way they do that is, like I said, the medical communication, MSLs. You also have marketing team that's working together. You also have sales team actually working together. All of these teams are working together to promote that product. And as you can see, marketing team does a lot of the collaboration with the scientific team, which is the MSL that I talked about, or the medical communication team. Because marketing team can actually create brochures and things like that, but they can't necessarily put the scientific data on it or scientific information without opinion from, or not opinion, but consulting with MSLs or medical communication team. This is where they're trying to build their brand, promote their, you know, materials, things like that. This could be brochure form, advertisement on the TV, on the website, things like that, even on the radio. And they're also going to target their specific target audience too. So if it's for like elder, if it's older adults that they're targeting, a lot of times they'll do radio or they'll do TV or newspaper, because, a lot of the older generation still likes reading newspapers, like listening to radios. So things like that. Market access is the same thing. Basically, once a drug gets approved, you want to penetrate the market. You want to be on the market and make sure that you're reaching out to your target audience and letting them know, hey, we have a new product coming on, and our product is better than what you have. You might want to try it or talk to your doctor next time you visit him, things like that. And this is, as a PharmD, this is where you can come in, because you have base, you have the base foundation for all of this stuff. You learned it, you know it. A lot of you are, if you're already working in pharmacies, you're applying this in a real world situation. The only thing that you would need to have upskill would be to, match with the marketing skills. So you might not know like the entrepreneurial aspect of it, business aspect of it. So you would need to upskill that. And again, that can be done basically either trying to apply, or if the company is willing to, train you on it, taking a lot of business classes, or if you even have MBA, so you really do have all of the base foundation. And then again, just kind of knowing the right people in a right group can also make a huge difference. Another thing is attention to detail. So as a pharmacist, we look at, if you're working in a pharmacy, whether it's retail or if you're working in a hospital pharmacy, we have to be very detail oriented because we're looking at the drugs that are getting to the patient. So we're looking at the dose, we're looking at the drug, make sure it's the right drug, the right dose, it's in right solution if you're working in the pharmacy, in hospital, making sure there is no side effects or adverse events. Make sure there is no drug-to-drug interaction if they're taking other drugs. So all of that is basically pounded in you when you went through the pharmacy school. So other things are easy to learn. It's not that hard. You just have to keep trying. I know I keep saying that, but I'll tell you a little bit about my story if we have time later, how it wasn't as easy as it sounds, getting the job that I actually wanted. If we have time, I'll talk about it. But I want to tell you about the more different jobs that you could, as a pharmacist go into. Second one is the pharmacovigilance, or safety, basically. So when they're doing the clinical trials, I was mentioning that they're looking at the adverse events, looking at the side effects, basically. They are compiling the list of this because when you go, for example, when you pull a package insert of a drug and you go through it, it tells you the percentage, percent likely, like a percentage of having this side effect, for example, headache, and they'll have like a number, 10%. And all of that data is getting compiled from these clinical trials. So they're looking at the safety report. So any adverse events or any serious adverse events. So serious versus adverse event. So for example, adverse event is just like a headache. They took Tylenol or they took paracetamol and they're fine. Serious adverse event is where they're actually hospitalized for whatever reason. It could be the side effect or something happened. And they actually have to be in hospital for critical care. Two different things. The adverse event is just one small line that data gets captured in. Serious adverse event, the site actually has to fill out huge forms and send it in, along with hospital records. And this is where they're monitoring all of that, because at the end, all of this data also gets submitted to the FDA to look at the prevalent, or to look at the side effects, which side effects were more common within the patient population that received this drug. And then again, they're also working with the regulatory authorities to improve product quality as well. As a pharmacist, within this role, you would need strong verbal and written communication, in-depth understanding of pharmacology and patient safety, which you already know. Expertise in adverse event documentation, monitoring, and reporting. This you can learn. It's not that hard. Documentation can be learned. Ability to organize and prioritize tasks. I feel like a lot of you know this at this point, unless you're still in school. If you're already a professional, you know how to take care of your life. So I don't think that's a big deal. Attention to detail. You learned this in pharmacist school too. And then cross-functional collaboration. This is where you're communicating with different departments. So as a pharmacist, you also learn this as you're talking to doctor or nurses, or even patients. Regulatory affairs. So this department, basically, they gather evidence from clinical trial data, and they submit it to the reg bodies to prove the product safety, efficacy. So this is where I'm talking about when the data is collected and it's getting submitted to the FDA. This is the department that does that. And they're also ensuring that the data that's submitted is done in a way that's acceptable for FDA, because there are regulations and rules as how this data gets submitted. They just can't submit all the raw data. It has to be compiled, organized by certain guidelines that are released by FDA. They also assist in preparation and filing of IND. So that's when I was saying investigational new drug before the drug goes into the clinical trials or human testing, basically. As well as the new drug application, so that's post-human testing. And then the BLA, which is the biologics license application. So this is also gets filed if your drug is an infusion. So it has to be taken as an injection versus pill. They need to apply for separate BLA application. They also collaborate with cross-functional teams as well. So this could be data management, FDA, a lot of different people coming in to make sure this gets done correctly. Again, as a pharmacist, you have knowledge of the disease state. You have the knowledge of the new drug. The only thing you would need to upskill is regards to the reg affairs would be the communication skills with FDA, licensing, filing of applications, data compilation. Again, this can be learned, you have a strong scientific background as a pharmacist. Another one is a good skill for PharmD, or a good department for PharmDs to work in, is medical writer. They prepare, edit, finalize protocols, IBs, which is the investigation brochure, all of that stuff. They also collaborate with clinical scientists, biostatistician, because remember, if they're writing a protocol, if they're writing a investigation brochure, they need the data, and the data is provided by biostatistician because they don't have expertise to work the data. So that's where the biostatistician work with medical writers to create those documents. And then I'll go into my job, which is a clinical research associate. What I do is I work in phase 1, 2, and 3. Basically, when you read a journal or article that's released, the primary journal I'm talking about, it says randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled, blah, 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 drug. And then you go into it and it says this was a multi-center, multi-country, whatever study. That's where it comes in. I work at different sites, which is multi-center. For example, let's look at phase 2 study, for example. I want to start this phase 2 study. I want to get 200 patients for my phase 2 study for this disease state, let's say NASH. Obviously, one hospital or one site, we call it, is not going to be able to randomize all 200 patients, nor do I want them to, because you want your data to be diversified as much as possible. So if there is an issue at a site level, a major issue, all of your data does not get, all of your data is still intact because other sites are doing it differently. Because if you're getting 200 patients from one site and there's a major issue at that site, your data becomes useless and you just spend all of that money and time into it. So this is where multi-center comes in. Let's say I want 40 sites to randomize 200 patients total. So, each site could be randomizing 5 patients or 10 patients. One site could randomize 10 patients, but one site might be only able to do 2 or 3. So it'll even out eventually. So as a CRA, for example, I'll be responsible for 8 of those 40 sites. And then another CRA might be responsible for other 8. I will go to those sites. I'm constantly traveling, by the way, making sure that the data, the patients that are randomized or enrolled in the trial, first of all, meet the eligibility criteria. So this is where the protocol comes in. There is a strict protocol that's issued for each phase of the trial, and the site has to follow that protocol. And within that protocol, there is an inclusion and exclusion criteria. And then they have to make sure that those inclusion and exclusion criteria or eligibility are met for the patient to enroll in that trial. I'm looking at that. Basically, I'm following protocol to make sure the data collected at the site level for that patient is in fact good data. And it's done in a what we call GCP manner, which is a good clinical practice manner. And there's a huge document on that as to what's included in GCP, how certain things should be done. If you want to, like, if you're interested in reading, it's really boring, but if you just want to know. So this is where I come in, and I'm making sure that everything gets submitted. You also have IRB, which I don't know if a lot of you know about IRB, which is the Institutional Review Board. Basically, they are overseeing patient safety, and they're submitting this protocol, any documents associated with the study to the IRB, and the IRB will review that document and they will approve it. So before anything gets done on the study, the patient has to consent, right? The patient has to agree. And this is where ICF, or informed consent form, comes in. That is the first thing that the patient signs before doing any study thing. And the patient form could be, 20 to 30 pages long. This is where the site will sit down with the patient, go through that informed consent form, letting them know the risk associated with the study, what's being collected. So if there's any blood that's being collected, how much of it is being collected, what are the side effects, all of that gets explained to the patient. And then on the last page of that form is where the patient will sign their name, and then the site, whoever explained it, will sign it. And after that, the patient can move forward in the study. And as they're collecting, data, the data could be, when I say data, the data is lab reports, labs that are being collected, vital signs that are being collected, anything specific to the study. So if they're looking at AST or ALT levels that are being specifically collected, they're following visit criteria. So in the protocol, for example, it states that the patient need to come in on the first day, which is when they signed the informed consent. I wish I had an example to show you. All of these different things needs to be done on first day. The second visit will be week 4, which is the end of week. So make sure that those are being followed. The patient comes in on day 1, and then the next meeting is on week 4. If the patient comes in on week 5, that is what we call protocol deviation, because you're deviating from the protocol, right? So that gets, if it's a major issue, that actually gets reported to the IRB, which is the Institutional Review Board, or the Safety Committee. And they actually look at that, and they can either halt the study at halt the whole study. They could halt the site, which is that site can no longer participate in that study. Or they could just say, that's fine, continue with the study. Thank you for letting us know. And a lot of time it's more of the patient safety that they look at than anything else. As a CRA, we have to be very detail oriented. You have to know critical thinking skill and problem solving skill, because there's always going to be problems that are coming at your site. It's not very straightforward. You need to be able to figure out a way to resolve those issues. You have to be flexible and adaptable. That's one of the huge thing, because a lot of times the sites that I go to, they're not just enrolling my patients in my study. they have like 50 other studies that are going on at the same time, and then they're also looking at that data for other studies. So things can come up, they might have to reschedule, and this is where you need to be flexible and adaptable, basically. So if you're scheduled to be on site, for example, tomorrow, in the site, your site contact will probably call you today and be like, oh, sorry, I have other patient coming in tomorrow. I can't meet with you, or I can't do this. We're gonna have to reschedule. So, that's another thing, you have to be flexible and adaptable. So there's just a lot of things that do go in as a CRA. And I have listed some of the things here. So for example, let's talk about some of the specific things that I do. So before the site gets selected, we have this what we called pre-study. In the second point, pre-study site visit. So basically, before the site gets selected, I would go out into the site. I would check, make sure first of all, they have enough people to conduct the study. So enough patient population in their database, because you don't want to select the site or activate the site if they don't have patients, because it's going to sit there and not do anything. Second, you want to make sure that they have necessary equipment to carry the study out. So this could be like a deep freezer. If they need -60 freezer, you want to make sure they have that, because not everyone might have -60 freezer, if they need certain special equipment. So for example, I know for the NASH study, they need special equipment to measure fat content in your liver. And not a lot of sites have those because they're expensive. And that site needs to have that to complete some of the study procedures, I look at all of that. And if they have all of that, then, I would just let my project manager know that, yes, this site has everything that they need, and all the patients that they need should be okay to activate the site. And the project manager will be like, okay, all right, thanks. And then, start the next process. So let's say now the site is selected for the study. Now you need to train them, right? Because this is the first time they're seeing the protocol. This is the first time they're seeing the study. So as a CRA, I would go back out to that site. I would actually train them on the protocol, the requirements. And when I say train the study staff, I mean like the PI, which is the doctor that's going to oversee the trial. I'm going to train the nurses that are under him. I'm going to train the coordinators that are, working on the study. I'm going to train the data entry person that are going to be entering data in the system. So that's usually about 3 to 6 hours, depending on the protocol, the training. So basically a whole day. And then once they get activated and there's, SIVs completed, and let's say they randomize their first patient, I would go back out to the site again to do visit, what we called monitoring visit. Now, since they have first patient randomized, they have data collected for that patient. We are actually going up there and looking at that data. We're reviewing that data, making sure that they did everything right according to the protocol, make sure they collected the data correctly. And then we are also, in our mind, we're also looking at fraud activity, because you don't want sites creating fake data, fake patients, fake things. It happens very rarely, but that's still something that's part of our job that we have to make sure that it's not happening, And there are a lot of interesting stories from old things that happen if you really want to look at the fraudulent data. And then we're also communicating with internally. So this is with our project manager. This could be with our project coordinator, could be other CRAs on the study. If you have any questions or anything like that, we reach out to them to like, hey, have you come across this issue at your site? How'd you handle it? So there is a lot of cross collaboration that we talk to. For example, if at the site level, they ran out of lab kits and they need a lab kits because they have a patient coming in next week, we'd reach out to the lab coordinator and be like, hey, can you send this out ASAP? If they have IP or the drug, they're running low on that, we want to make sure that we reach out to the IMP department, make sure they send that out. So there is a lot of moving pieces and a lot of things that are happening that you have to be cognizant of when you're working as a CRA. And then you're also, as a CRA, you're not just on one study. For example, I'm on 3 different studies right now. And I have about 20 sites or so, which means I'm traveling constantly every week to a different site, different city. So that could also take toll on your body. It's a little exhausting at times. Then you have what we call data cut that comes up. So data cut or data lock basically is when the site will come in, or the sponsor or the company will come in and say, we want to cut this, the data, we want data lock to occur on this day. And basically all the data that has been entered at every site for this study so far, we want it to be cleaned. We want to make sure it's locked so that sites can go back and change data. And then what they'll do is they'll extract that data, and this is where they will analyze the data to make sure that the drug is working, or if there's any safety concerns or anything like that. So that we work with sites for that as well. And here's just some of the duties and roles as a CRA. I won't go through them in detail just for the time's sake, because I know we're approaching that time here. But I basically what I just told you is basically here in a chart form. And then some of the CROs that you want to look for in India, I'm sure you're already aware of this if you are interested in industry, but there are a lot. And then I've just listed some of them here. And then I can tell you that, you know, like Bioclinica, I worked with them. They're the data entry company, so they capture data. CliniRx is another one. I work with Covance. Covance is a huge CRO here in US, but they also have a presence in India and Bangalore. Endpoint is another company. They do a lot of data capture, so they have a system, and I use their system too. Eurofins is a lab company. They do a lot of proprietary lab. So, you know, if your study requires specific lab that needs to be captured, then your companies like Eurofins will come in. Icon just acquired PRA, and they're like a couple of $1 billion company. There is a huge presence here in US, but they also have a pretty big presence in India, in Bangalore, here in Bangalore, Chennai. IQVIA is another one. There is a huge company here in North Carolina, their headquarters, but as you can see, they're also located in Mumbai and Bangalore. MedPace was a company that I used to work for. They also have a presence in India, in Mumbai. MMS Holdings is another company. I think they do a lot of the regulatory affairs stuff and medical writing. Is located here in Michigan, but they also have a presence in Bangalore. Same thing with PPD. It's a huge company, and these companies, when I say huge, they're pretty, you know, a couple $1 billion companies. Same thing with Syneos. So you have a lot of options. It's just breaking into it, right? And one of the platforms that you can use, obviously, is LinkedIn. Reach out to the people, your peers that are working on these companies. Say, hey, I'm interested. Do you have a few minutes to talk about it? And then again, if you reach out to, you know, let's say 25, 50 people, only one might respond. It's just how it is, you know, realistically. But you still, if that one person is willing to help you out, it could make it it could make or break it, basically. Second thing is, let's say you have an interview with a company. Now you want to know more about this company. Where do you go besides their main website? You know, you look at LinkedIn. Another one is Glassdoor. Go into that, look at the company, look at the reviews of that company. Sometimes they'll even post interview questions that were asked for that position. They'll even have a breakdown of the salaries, like what the expectations are for the salaries. So go in there and look at that as well. Reaching out to your peers. So for example, your graduating class, someone from that class went into industry, you know, reach out to them via LinkedIn or Facebook or what have you, and then just talk to them. And so there is a lot of avenues. It's just, it's not going to be easy peasy, just getting the job. Oh, I want it. You're going to have to work hard, but I'm pretty sure that if you keep going at it, you will eventually land what you want. And that's my whole spiel. Any questions?
First,
I'm sorry.
Let me, well, first I will ask students, I have few, but I will wait till somebody else asks the questions. Again, Kunjal, excellent presentation. Okay, not only that I learned some things, but I'm sure some of the youngsters who are looking for career. I will let them ask some questions and then I will do some finishing touches of what I as a professor get from this presentation. So folks, if you're shy, you are really falling behind. Okay, as Kunjal said, you have to talk to 50 people in order to get your job. Okay, now here is a friendly thing. You are certainly motivated because this is an evening in your place, most of them, evening, afternoon, or certainly a weekend for all of us. And you have decided to come and listen to this. So you are motivated. Now, I'm not sure what is stopping you from asking the question from a youngster with just 2 years already, probably, who got a job. Ask him before I come tell you what I think you should do. Go ahead, please.
I would like to ask a question. It's okay.
Please. Yeah. Just tell
first
whom you
of
are.
all,
Yeah.
Yes. Good evening. It's a beautiful evening here. It's raining here. So first of all, good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Anit Arvind, and I'm a fellow of critical care pharmacotherapy here in Medica Hospital in Ranchi. So it was, first of all, it was a great presentation, as Dr. Chandrasekhar sir has said, and it was really informative, and especially the slide, I think your second or third slide, where you have categorized each stage and what role anyone can fit in. So that was a very interesting slide, and about that slide only I would like to ask you a question that right from the starting, right from the stage where the molecule is developed or designed, or even the thought process has started, I could see that the PharmD, the picture of PharmD student, PharmD graduate comes in. I think from there only itself, one can see an opportunity to get inside a clinical study setting. And even till phase 1, 2, 3, a PharmD graduate can come in. So I would like to ask a question that if right from the start till almost the end, if a PharmD graduate can come in, then why not is it possible for them to be the principal investigator and be responsible for the whole of the study? I don't know if this is a lay question or not, but this I would really like to ask because this always intrigued me.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think when I had that slide, what I was trying to say is, I guess, I don't know if I got the wrong impression, but each person can be in that category. They're not moving. The clinical trial as a whole, it's moving, right? And then I know when you ask like principal investigator, so there is also regulations and rules to be a principal investigator. So I know here in the US, for example, if you're an MD or DO, you can be principal investigator, but in Canada, if you're a DO, you cannot be a principal investigator. You have to hold MD. So there are rules and regulations on that. However, as a PharmD, you can be what they call sub-I, which is a sub-investigator, which you'll basically report to the principal investigator, but you're also doing the duties of an investigator. So yeah, you can be a sub-I, but you can't be a PI just because of the rules and regulations. And I'm not sure what the rules and regulations are in India.
Okay. That was okay. That I'm satisfied with that answer. And again, one small question again. Talking about I was really intrigued by your presentation, and right now I'm in a clinical setting. I work in a clinical hospital setting, and if tomorrow I have to come up to you and ask you that, sir, I would really like to work with you, then what is the checklist that I need to have, that this particular skills I need to have before stepping into your office?
So that also depends on which roles you want to work in, right? Because as I mentioned,
as a pharmacologist, if I suppose, because right now I'm in the department of pharmacology in my hospital. So as a pharmacologist, if I have to make a checklist, to see if I'm capable. So what are the points I
Okay.
should see for?
So let's say you want to work as a pharmacologist and you are currently working as a pharmacology in the hospital, right? So let's say you found a job or company job description that you saw. Now, the way I would go about it is pull up your resume or CV, look at the job description, align those job description with your CV, like align it with what you're doing, similarly what the job description states for that job you're applying. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So
are there any specific skills that I need to have?
Yeah, there is always going to be skill set that they're going to need. You always want to stand out, right, from other interviewees. And that one of the way is they're going to look at, because they won't see you the first time. They look at your resume. They're like, okay,
I will call you in 15 minutes. I've got a meeting.
that he doesn't, the other candidates don't have. And that's why I said, align the job description with your current job and make sure you match it. And then when you're going on the interview, you're telling them, you know, I've done this, I've done that, and I've done that, which is what you're looking for. You know, for example, pharmacologist, I've worked in clinical settings that if you're applying for bench research, other interviewees might not have that experience because they're PhD candidates, you know, or they have PhD, so they work mostly in bench. You could tell them I can bring that to the table. So there is just a lot of things that you would have to look at and kind of align it with your resume. If you really want that job, you know, and then another thing is go on LinkedIn, try to, as I said, contact that people that are in the same position right now at the same company, ask them what the atmosphere at the company is like, and then kind of get to know them and ask them questions that you have. For example, like, how would I go about applying for this job? Or what are the one thing that your company is looking for in this job position? You know, and then try to, again, mimic your resume or CV or interview question or answers in that regard. Does that help?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, and then another thing is you can go on glassdoor.com, which is another website that tells you about the company, the current CEO, the reviews, because other employees like you, they probably leave a review on there. Also tells you job salary for your job that you're applying. So when you're also, for example, they're asking you for how much salary, you have an idea, you know, like, okay, they're offering this much for this position. So you're not undershooting, but you're not overshooting. Does that make sense? Because if you're undershooting, you're not getting for the job that you're doing. But if you're overshooting, they're not going to hire you because it's outside of their budget.
Sure. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
So any other question? Just like Rohit, please.
Yeah, actually, I would like to have a couple of questions.
Yeah, just tell us, where are you from, sir?
Yeah, sure. So actually, I'm Dr. Ilmataz from Pharmaceutical Science Department, Ranchi State University, Somalia. So I'm reaching you out all the long from Somalia. As you have said, it's very motivated Saturday. So really thank you, Dr. Kunjal, and actually was very grateful for the presentation. So actually, I do have two questions. The first question is like, what could be actually the trend of the clinical trial with respect to the upcoming revolution of the personalized or individualized medicines? So what would be the trend of the clinical trial with respect to the upcoming revolution of the personalized medicine or the individualized medicine, and how the pharmacist could like get opportunities from this side? So, and if it's going to be promised field, like if like going to be a good positive trend for the clinical trials, like being involved with all this pharmacogenomics, then I think maybe we have to create a sufficient awareness to the upcoming pharmacists, focus more in such a.
Yeah.
So what could you, yeah, if you can just add your.
So that's a good question. I don't know much about from the clinical or the industry side, but what I can tell you is that a lot of the rare disease studies that we work in, so these are very rare disease. We actually looking at gene, you know, if they're a gene therapy disease or if there's gene defectiveness disease, we're looking at that before the patient gets into the trial. And then from a pharmacist perspective or clinical side of it, it's inevitable, obviously, because we're advancing so much in technology right now that there is going to be a time where your body is just going to be, or the drugs that are going to be given to you is just going to be specific to your body in future, you know. And as a pharmacist, as I mentioned, you have a very strong foundation on disease state, clinical side, and then pharmacogenomics that's coming along. It would be just better to, you know, keep up with it, I guess, is my thing. Going into the CEs, any experts they're presenting on pharmacogenomics, I'm no means or no expert on pharmacogenomics, I can tell you that. So looking at that perspective, because you're also like, if you think about it, you are providing care to the patients at this stage, right? You're giving patients their care. When the time comes for that, you're also going to be the experts that are going to be providing care. It's just going to be different. You're going to be providing individualized care to those patients that are specific to them. But nonetheless, you'll need the expertise, or you'll need the experience, or what have you, education for that, in order to provide that care to that patient, you know, whether it be just general care, or we're talking about in future for pharmacogenomics. And then a lot of times I feel like here in the US side that we're going to be collaborating a lot with the doctors once that does come through, because right now we have that practice started, collaborations with doctor for medication management or diabetes management or hypertension management, which is going to be just one other thing being added. We just don't know how it's going to go at this time. Excellent. But it's inevitable.
Yes. And yeah, the second question actually, like if there is any lesson that we have learned from COVID-19 clinical trials that could maybe reduce the long time process for the approving the medicines of like many other diseases that could be even dangerous than COVID-19. So if there is any lesson that we have learned that could reduce the like, you know, the timing for the approving, or like you know, kind of like from the approving time perspective.
Yeah, so that's another good question. I'm sure there are a lot of lessons learned during the COVID-19 thing, not just from our as a pharmacist perspective, but like the FDA themselves. I'm sure they learned a lot of lessons, CDCs, everyone basically. As far as the timing goes, the reason they actually moved this so fast is because of the pandemic. They had to, there was no other option. But I'm not sure as far as any other disease that they're gonna do that for. I know that FDA has designation for fast track medicine for rare disease. So for example, one of the trials that I'm working on is for Pompe disease, which is a very rare disease. And they given the company I work with, sorry, not for, they given them a fast track designation, which means they're going to review their data first when it gets submitted, or a very faster than what they would do with another normal submissions, because they want to get this drug out to those rare disease patients. And as far as learning lessons and changing anything, I'm pretty sure the FDA is still behind on their tech and stuff. So I don't think that's going to come anytime soon. We hope that it does, but you know, they're just going to take their time.
Okay. So maybe I've took a lot of time, but this is the last just option that the opportunity that maybe I will take. So from African context perspective, so you have discussed actually in details about the pharmacovigilance and the importance of pharmacovigilance. But my question is, this pharmacovigilance is like based on the it will become like a luxury services or secondary services based on the like the category of the countries, like developed country or developing country, because we don't see them maybe here in Somalia, we don't see them in the majority of the African countries. So it is just happening based on the country categories, or or otherwise maybe it's not important, and just we are maybe, you know, like exaggerating the process of the post marketing survey.
So you're talking about the pharmacogenomics, right?
No,
No,
pharmacovigilance.
I mean vigilance, yeah.
Pharmacovigilance.
Because
Oh,
yeah, like we don't
pharmacovigilance.
see them. Yeah, we don't see them here in Africa. I have did my studies in India. I have seen like much work being done in India, maybe in Gulf countries, in Western countries, obviously, but in Africa, we don't see this pharmacovigilance like much more. So is it like a service that being provided by the industry, pharmaceutical industry, based on the country categories? Like if it is like developed country, then we have to have a pharmacovigilance center for our medicine, like from the perspective of pharmaceutical industry, or how do you see it? Like,
So the pharmacovigilance is also known as the safety department, as what we like to call it. And it is required here. And I think European Commission and in India, when they're carrying out the clinical trials, that is required by those commissions to have someone oversee those safety notifications or see the safety part of it or aspect of the clinical trials. So when you say that you don't see it a lot in the African countries, I don't know if they're because they're not carrying out those trials there or what, but they should have the safety department. It might not necessarily be, the department might not necessarily be in Africa. It might be being handled by another country, but they're still going to them if there is a patients in Africa that are being enrolled for clinical trials.
okay,
Very good.
Yeah, so like I said, it might not be being handled in that country or continent, but it is going somewhere. Because when we work, a lot of the trials that we work in is a global trial. So we have countries in Australia that are enrolling patients at the same time that we're doing it here in US or Europe or Italy. So, you know, we have a one centralized pharmaco safety department that handles all of that.
okay, thank you, actually, really grateful.
Yeah.
Grateful job.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think I'm very happy that there were a few questions and they're really great questions. Okay. So I think in terms of time, I will, and also it's Saturday. And first, Kunja, great presentation. Okay. And you make us proud as being an UF alumni. And one of the things which I would love to let all the students know is any degree will give you the foundation. That's all it does. Where you go with it is pretty much up to you. So the fact that you are attending this seminar, getting the more knowledge, and then everybody has to really look, be a little bit of an introvert in looking up what are they good at, what they enjoy most. Okay. Some people may not like to see a patient every day. Some people may not like traveling every day. So if you don't like traveling and if you cannot eat different type of food every day, or if you can't sleep, you have to sleep on your bed, then you are not going to be the CRO. Okay, you'll be a very bad CRO because you can't do those things. So as you can say, literally as somebody else said, why can't PharmD be an investigator? Okay, like this thing. Yes, pretty much everything requires a terminal degree. If you're writing an NIH degree, you have to be a PhD or a professor. So that is just to control the quality. It doesn't mean that a PharmD who has, so just you collaborate with somebody else, like collaborative practice. So you find out a doctor who doesn't have the time, but who is an interest in working on your project. So what this one and what Dr. Cassandra Starr's presentation, and I'm sure many others tells you from these young people, when they start, they may not know exactly where they want to go. College gives them the opportunity to interact, to go on trips. Like I'm sure Kunjal at least already know the Indian heritage and culture. But still, now that he had been the 5 years of pharmacy training, when he goes to India, he said, see the India or saw the India in a different light. Not just like a tourist without the pharmacy background. So use the opportunity to travel, use the opportunity to meet and interact. And now, like the gentleman from Doctor from Somalia asked, you don't even have to travel. You have that interest, vision, interact with people. As he says, some of the things like glass door, I haven't even heard of it. Well, I think I don't need a glass door in my life, but it is just this simple things which you can learn can work out it. I will give you a few examples. When I was there, I learned how to type. My typing was a big skill at that time. Naturally, no pharmacy school, nobody teaches you typing. But as you became a professor, you have to learn the Microsoft Word, you have to type your own skills. Now I type the letter and my secretary only prints it out. So this is simple things. First, you have an interest, learn what you are good at it. And please don't wait till somebody will reward you or pay for you to do the job. The first job, nobody is going to pay for you. You show them the outcome, what you can do, and then people start paying for you. And there's not a single job which you know everything. What you should know is you know more than your competitor. Okay, somebody may be good in PharmD, somebody say, look, I got a great personality to interact with people, which you cannot measure. But any clinical trial person, for that matter, most jobs require the soft skill of can you work with people? Can you create a positive vibes with people? So if you have that quality, you go on the job where people interaction is required. If you hate talking to somebody, then get a lab job so you don't have to talk to anyone. So these are some very foundational things which one can find out about yourself. And unfortunately, many people don't use that type of analysis, and then they get up into a job which becomes a dead-end job simply because they perform at the minimal level required to fulfill the duty. So again, Kunjal doesn't have to take this. He has already graduated. He doesn't have to make me happy by making this presentation. But next time you ask me for reference letter, I can certainly quote what a great presentation he did. Okay, so yeah. it is all the taking that initiative to do something more than required of you is the first characteristic for any success in any job. With that, I close this session. Again, I have to say Atish Saha started this program. I am at University of Findlay. We get together over talks. We found that both of us have the same goal to improve wherever we are. I want to improve University of Findlay, my students' knowledge base and give them opportunity, and he has to improve his patient and in India. So we team together. Same, I'm teaming with 4 other people with different interests. So this technology enables you to reach to a lot more people all around the world. Find your interest, extend your hand. As you can say, not every hand outstretched will be met with a great smile and handshake. But if you do it 10 times, I'm telling you, you're going to meet a person who will enrich and your life and in turn get enriched by you. Thank you again, Kunjal. And I am going to post this video to my YouTube. Not somebody, people will go through it and you will be surprised. They do not listen to all 1 hour, 10 minutes of a talk, but they will get the snippets which they interested. And your third slide was really informative about what all the various skill set in life science you can require and where you can join. With that, goodbye. Thank you very much.
If you could allow me to come in once. Yeah.
Please, yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Kunjal. It was a nice presentation by you, and thank you all participants for your nice question and making it a more interacting session rather than one-sided one. I have a little question, a small question for Dr. Kunjal. As we know that United States is a multi-ethnic nation. So how you make sure that you enroll appropriate participation from all ethnic groups in your study?
So we don't really look at that. It just whoever comes and is eligible, because like I said, there are a lot of times that studies are being done are global studies. So there are people being enrolled in Europe, in Asia, things like that. So they're also enrolling people from those countries and getting data from there. Right. Unless another thing is, unless the disease state requires, like, for example, prevalence of that disease is more common in Asian population, then we might look at that. But if it's very similar across board, then we're not looking at that diversity group, because we're also going to get that data when that company does phase 4 study, which is, observation in a way, but throughout the whole world.
And how challenging you find people to join into the study, the participant to join into the study in US, because in India, if we ask someone to join our study, they said, don't make me a guinea pig. Okay. So from US perspective, yeah, how much difficult you find to get the participant?
So you'd be surprised. When we do phase 1 study, so that's when we're looking at safety people, we have a lot of people that actually do want to join the study, because the companies that work, they pay the person. So they give them money, they give them stipend, they give them food, they give them room. Basically they're in a one room getting taken care of by nurses while they're in the study, and they're getting paid for it. So yeah, a lot of people do want to join, but when they get to phase 2 and 3, it gets a little difficult, because we're now trying to find patients that have the disease and that met the criteria to join the study. So depending on, again, the disease state. So like, if we're doing a cardiovascular study, a lot of patients have cardiovascular issues. So, it might not be as challenging. But for example, Pompe disease that I'm working on, we had really hard time finding patients because it's such a rare disease. So we actually have to create advocate group. And a lot of times the patients that have this disease, they're very proactive in looking at different trials or different therapies for their disease. Because Pompe disease is very debilitating. It makes you weak. It's a genetic disease. So a lot of them, they are aware of their disease state, and they're very proactive about their disease. And we have a website here, which is called clinicaltrials.gov. So if you have time, check it out. Basically lists all the clinical trials that are being done at the United States level. And it also tells you if the trial is open for enrollment or if it's closed to enrollment. So that would be another way that patient would contact the site, is because they'll have a phone number listed in there too, if they want to join.
Thank you. Last question from my end. Sorry for this many questions. Last question is like, how difficult, from a medical advisor side, okay, how difficult it is to convince the KOL out there in US.
When you say convince, like the patient to join, or KOL, what do you mean?
Yeah, a KOL to get into the study or to start the study.
So that I don't have much experience with, as how difficult it is. A lot of times the KOLs that are in the study are either working already for sponsor, or sponsor is actually reaching out to a very well respected doctor within that disease state that they specialize in. And then they'll ask them questions, and if they're okay with it, they'll bring them on board. If they're not, if they don't have time or they don't have capacity, they'll reach out to the next person that's expert in their field and kind of go from there.
Very good.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I think it has lasted a wonderful an hour and a half. So I think I'm going to call it quits at this point. And again, Kunjal, great job. And I certainly hope to see in one of the future India trips, people will be able to listen to you in person. And we'll certainly make sure. And
I think, sir, we can have one more session with Dr. Kunjal, because we have got many questions. I believe many questions can come up.
We can have it. Yeah, let's do it in spring again. One more session. So we have it. That's great. Okay.
No problem.
Thanks again, Kunjal. Kunjal, can you just text me your home address, please, for me? Okay. And thank you very much, Asish, and have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we will have, if all goes well, we will have another session on December 4th. I think the Saturday, whichever it is. Okay.
It's Saturday night there, right?
Yeah. Saturday night.
Yeah. Go everyone, enjoy your Saturday night.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for the second series. And I hope we have got participation from 151 people across different countries. So thank you for being with us, and be with us for our upcoming series too. Thank you. Have a good night.
No, Surya.